Accused by the European Union and human rights groups of backsliding on democracy, Georgia's Prime Minister hits back.
There are some forces which unfortunately negatively influence the decision-making in the European bureaucracy. So that's what we see. We don't think that it's in the objective interest of the European Union to support the revolutions in Georgia.
Why would the EU seek to do that? Is there any evidence?
The EU ambassador to Georgia made very clear statements in support of the opposition and against the ruling party. And is it in line with the democratic principles? Of course, it's not.
Irakli Kobakhidze tells us why he believes the EU tried to help the opposition bring down his government. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ghida Fakhry. For more than a year, Georgia's capital Tbilisi has witnessed protests by opponents of Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze and his Georgian Dream Party. They started after his party claimed victory in a parliamentary election that was criticized by the European Union and other international organizations for being fraudulent. Last month, protesters tried to storm the presidential palace in the capital, Tbilisi. This followed municipal elections, which were boycotted by opposition parties and which saw the ruling Georgian Dream Party win majorities everywhere. Protesters continue to demand the release of opposition leadership figures and snap parliamentary elections. There's also anger on the streets about the government's decision to suspend talks on joining the European Union. While the standoff with the EU continues, Georgia's Prime Minister insists his country is still on track to one day join the bloc. I sat down recently with Irakli Kobakhidze in Tbilisi and asked him about his vision for the future of Georgia. Prime Minister Kobakhidze, in early October, protesters tried to storm the presidential palace here in Tbilisi after your party declared victory in all municipal elections, which the opposition boycotted. You've since charged opposition leadership figures with attempting to overthrow the government. Just how fragile is Georgia's stability today?
We enjoy the stability nowadays in our country, and I think that we will keep the stable environment in Georgia, which is a key for country's development. We know that we had to face many challenges in the last couple of years, especially since 2020 parliamentary elections. We had to face 5 different coup attempts in the country. But now the situation is fully stable, and we managed to stabilize the situation with our consistent policies. The opposition got very weak through the kind of steps that they have made during the last couple of years. Now we enjoy the stability. There will be no elections during the next 3 years, which means that we can be fully concentrated on country's development. And despite all these attempts, these turbulences that the country had during the last couple of years, we enjoyed a very high rate of economic development, and we are now fully focused on that.
Some human rights organizations have accused your government of democratic backsliding. There's been a lot of attention and focus on your foreign agents bill, which requires that all individuals and organizations considered to act in the interest of a foreign entity, for example, if they receive funding from overseas, to register as foreign agents. Human Rights Watch says the new bill's provisions clearly violate Georgia's obligations to uphold the rights to freedom of association and expression. It could be the end of Georgia's civil society. What do you say?
So, well, 2 years ago, we have adopted the transparency law, which is different from the recently adopted FARA law, which is a copy of the American one. We adopted the transparency legislation, which is only about transparency. So the only obligation which is envisaged by this law is just annual reporting, financial reporting to the state bodies by the non-governmental organizations, and that's it. So what we see, there was a lot of financing coming to Georgia from different sources, which were just designed to promote these revolutionary scenarios in the country. And we are happy that now also the Trump administration confirmed these kind of negative practices run through USAID and other institutions. And we are happy that Donald Trump's administration fully closed these organizations in the United States. And what we did later, when we saw this criticism about the transparency law, we copied the American FARA law. It's exact copy, but they are criticizing it again. So it's really ridiculous. For us, it's just ridiculous.
You recently accused the European Union of trying to overthrow your government and the constitutional order. That's a big accusation. Why would the EU seek to do that? Is there any evidence?
I don't think that it's in the interest of the European Union to overthrow the government in Georgia, but there are the influences which are quite obvious. And for example, very recently, before this last coup attempt happened on the 4th of October in Georgia, when the opposition was trying to violently enter the president's building, the official press speaker of the European Commission supported this rally with the title Peaceful Coup. So these are the facts. And again, so we don't think that it's in the objective interest of the European Union to support the revolutions in Georgia. But there are some forces which unfortunately negatively influence the decision-making in the European bureaucracy.
But the EU called your accusations baseless. Just how significant is this rift between Georgia and the EU?
So we have the videos. We have the videos with this kind of statements. We have also the statements by the ambassador of the European Union to Georgia, which was directly supporting when we talk about democracy. So the EU ambassador to Georgia directly supported the position for the 2024 parliamentary elections. So he made very clear statements in support of the opposition and against the ruling party. And is it in line with the democratic principles? Of course, it's not. So we see this kind of developments which undermine the democratic values in the European Union. And so these are the steps made by the European bureaucracy. And hopefully, again, the attitude to the Georgian people will change to a more fair one.
But where does this rift leave relations between the EU and Georgia? Because in late 2024, you announced that Georgia would pause discussions on its bid to join the European Union until 2028. The European Parliament declared Georgia's EU path, quote, effectively suspended. The EU has accused Georgia of democratic backsliding. Why do you still believe that Georgia can become a full member of the EU by 2030?
So we were facing artificial challenges on our path towards the European Union since 2022, when we submitted our official application for the candidate status to the European Union. If you compare Georgia with Moldova or Bosnia, other candidate countries, Georgia is much more advanced with regard to democracy, human rights, economic development. If you take all these different criteria, Georgia is much better. And by the way, later in January 2023, European Commission publicized a report with scoring. And the scoring showed that Georgia is much better compared to Moldova, compared to Bosnia. But these two countries received the candidate status, but Georgia's application has been rejected. No explanation, nothing. And so that's how this challenge started in the relationships between the European Union and Georgia. So finally, it's not Georgia who suspended anything. It's the European bureaucracy which decided to suspend Georgia's European integration for some time.
But let me ask you this then. Is Georgia's path still European, peaceful and principled as you have vowed?
Sure,
or has it changed?
Absolutely. We have a clear goal. It was our government which reflected the special norm into the constitution back in 2017 about Georgia's European integration. So Georgia is maybe one of the very few countries which has the respective norm enshrined into the constitution, which states that European integration is the constitutional goal for the country.
But that's from your side.
That's from our side.
Do you
and
think
we are
that
hopeful.
would be reciprocated by the EU?
We are hopeful. At this stage, it seems that their attitudes are different, counterproductive, but we are hopeful that until 2030, when it will be realistic for us to become the full-fledged member of the European Union, we are hopeful that by that time their attitude will change towards Georgia and towards the Georgian people.
And just this past July, 19 EU foreign ministers published a joint statement calling Georgia's trajectory, quote, anti-European and authoritarian. Doesn't this conflict with your statements and your goals?
Nobody can explain what is the content of these statements, and there are no explanations, nothing. Georgia is a democratic country. Georgia is the most democratic country in the region, but also beyond. If you look at all objective assessments, there are different rankings, different indexes, including published by European Commission, under the European Commission, but also many other organizations. According to all fact-based indexes and rankings, Georgia is much more advanced in terms of democracy, human rights, and many other things like budget transparency, transparency of the government, etc. If you take all these different criteria, Georgia is doing much better than any other candidate country. In some cases, like in terms of the low level of corruption, we are doing better than 7 or 8 countries of the European Union, according to the objective assessments. So these are the facts. And
so if these are some of the facts, Prime Minister, do you believe that the EU's change in tone and attitude toward Georgia could have something to do with its closer relations with Russia? Russia does still occupy over 20% of Georgian territory, but there is a closer relationship today than there was a couple of years ago.
The reason why we are demanding and requesting the fact-based discussions all the time is that the facts speak for our positions. And so when we talk about Russia, the fact is that Georgia has no diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation. It's only 2 countries in the region around us which have no diplomatic relations with Russia. It's Georgia and Ukraine. All other countries, including the candidate countries like Moldova, they have diplomatic relations. Their politicians used to visit the Russian Federation without any obstacles, and nobody is criticizing Moldova, for example, for their visits to the Russian Federation. Moldova, until now, is the member of the CIS. You know that CIS, the main international community under the Russian umbrella, and Moldova is still a member of the CIS, and nobody criticizes them. If you look at the trade figures, the Russian share in Georgian trade is much lower compared to other countries which are considered as pro-European, for example. These are the facts, and the rest is just speculations.
But the opposition here, Prime Minister, accuses your party, the Georgian Dream Party, of being pro-Russian.
But where are the facts? But where are the facts? There are 0 facts. Again, so if we take the diplomatic relations, the general relationships, if we take trade and economy and everything, so there are 0 facts, nothing. We have no communication even, no communication even. Again, so the Moldovan politicians, like the deputy minister, recently visited St. Petersburg to hold the negotiations with Gazprom. In Georgia, that's not the case. And again, so there are 0 facts.
It's not just the opposition here that accuses you of being pro-Russian. It's also the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, who said in his speech at the UN General Assembly in September, quote, "We have already lost Georgia in Europe. Georgia depends on Russia." How do you respond to that?
I don't want to respond to Mr. Zelensky because he's the president of the country under war. But something I have to say is that the Ukrainian government, on the highest level, was demanding from us to join the war against Russia. For example, I can remind about the statements by the Secretary of the National Security Council, by the Chief Advisor to Zelensky, and many others. They were explicitly, very clearly demanding from us to join the war against Russia, and we refused. And so these are the facts in this case.
And why did you refuse? Was it because you didn't want to engage
in
an indirect war with Russia, or did you refuse because you do not support
It was a clear statements about opening the second front in Georgia. And you can imagine that it would destroy the country fully. So we are a small country with less than 4 million population. We had to face many wars in this country, 4 different wars during the last 35 years, 4 different wars. We want to keep peace, and that's the demand of our society, and we are responsible to the Georgian society who wants to keep peace in the country.
Your predecessor, Irakli Kobakhidze, said that the enlargement of NATO was largely to blame for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Do you agree with him?
There are many the Western politicians who repeat the same, and so that's
But
just
do you agree with your predecessor?
I think that many things played a role. The main thing I would say about the war is that it was possible to avoid this war in Ukraine, and just shortly before the war was about to start, and it was quite clear that the war was to start soon. We are a small country, but we were calling the international community to do everything possible to avoid the war, which was possible. It was possible in January 2022, it was possible in December 2021. It was fully possible. Everybody knew that the war was about to start, but nobody was even trying to avoid it.
Do you then believe, Prime Minister, that the United States and other Western powers could have done more to avoid this war? In fact, that they did very little and they may even have sparked this war?
Well, the President Trump says that under his presidency, this war wouldn't happen, and I fully agree with that. Of course, it was possible to avoid this war, but the international community did not do much to be fully concentrated on that. And so finally you see that the country, a very nice country, our friendly country, Ukraine, is now destroyed, and they have huge problems in terms of there are so many casualties, infrastructure is destroyed, the economy is destroyed.
Do you see it as a proxy war between Russia and the United States?
The US administration says that it's the proxy war. I would not say it's the United States, but it's a proxy war between the Western community and Russia. So I'm just repeating the wording of the new US administration.
How important is NATO membership for Georgia today? Because in its 2024 annual report, NATO omitted any mention of Georgia and Ukraine's prospective memberships. It no longer mentions that they will become NATO members, which was a commitment for a long time, ever since the 2008 Bucharest summit. Is it still important for you to join NATO?
So that's the NATO's position, that Ukraine's and Georgia's accession to the alliance is not relevant at this stage. So we don't want to talk too much about the issue which is not relevant at this stage from the standpoint of NATO. So that's the kind of
But
position
from your
of Georgia.
perspective, Prime Minister?
Again, so since it's not kind of relevant issue at this stage, so when it will become relevant, we will talk about this issue later.
Let me ask you about the changing geopolitics in the region. Georgia has deepened its links with China and Iran. Just how strategic are these ties? Are they a direct challenge to Western influence? Is it a new realignment?
No, we try our best to expand our cooperation with many different countries across the world. So that's just our vision. And we are happy that we enjoy the strategic partnership with China, and we have signed the free trade agreement, and we have the visa-free regime with China, which helps us to develop our connectivity function, to strengthen our economy, to strengthen our political positions. That's very valuable for us. So the cooperation, the deepened cooperation with China is very valuable for us. In terms of Iran, we have no kind of special intensification of relations, but it's our neighborhood, and we have relationships with Iran, and that's the current situation. It's the same with other countries like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, all other neighboring countries have the same position, that they also try to develop their partnerships with different countries across the world. And again, China plays, of course, a very special role. And I have to say about China, it's the only peaceful superpower now in the world politics. So that's why we have kind of common values. We share the common values. That's why it's particularly valuable for us to deepen the cooperation with China.
Is it for you a more reliable partner than the United States?
No, I would not say like that. So for us, again, it's important to diversify our cooperation. In terms of the United States, we have a very clear statements about our cooperation with the United States. So I personally said several times that we stand ready to restore our strategic partnership with the United States from the blank page, let's say, and with a very clear and specific roadmap. The previous administration was extremely aggressive against the Georgian people and against the Georgian government, respectively. And the Biden administration decided to suspend the strategic partnership with Georgia after the election of President Trump, shortly before the inauguration. It was, I think, beginning of January this year. Again, so it's in our interest to restore strategic partnership with the United States, and we are patiently waiting for their position on that.
You mentioned the Biden administration. The sanctions that were imposed on some Georgian officials and judges by the Biden administration were not removed by the second Trump administration. What do you make of that?
So we are more optimistic. Of course, we are a bit concerned with the fact that the sanctions have not been removed and that there is generally kind of silence from the US side about Georgia. We are a bit concerned, but we are still optimistic again, and our offer is on the table, and our offer is to restore the strategic partnership, and we are going to patiently wait for their response also in the future.
How would you describe your government's foreign policy direction? Will it have to make hard choices between closer ties with the EU, with Russia, with China, with the United States?
I don't think that we have to make any kind of crucial choices. We have a pro-Western vision, and our goal is to become the full-fledged member of the European Union. So that's a very strategic and very clear goal. I think it's also very important for the European Union to use Georgia's role for expanding its cooperation with the East. Currently, you see that European Union is facing huge problems, economic problems. And back in 2008, European Union's share in the world economy was 30% in 2008. And now this is just 17.5%. So you see how essential economic problems for the European Union are. And from 2021, European Union has no access to the Russian market, which used to be an important market economically for the EU. And so they also lost access to the cheap natural resources. In this situation, of course, the European Union has to try to expand its economic cooperation with the East, with Asian market. And Georgia can play a very important role for the EU in this respect. So not only Georgia can benefit from its accession to the European Union, but also the European Union, I believe, can benefit from the Georgian membership in the Union. So that's why I hope that finally the pragmatic decisions will be made around the Georgia issue.
As part of deepening the strategic relationships within the region, you hosted the Prime Ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia. How do you view the US brokered peace agreement between the two of them? And does it make Georgia become a little less relevant for US policy?
I think this peace deal is extremely important. For many years, in the last 35 years, Georgia was playing a really crucial role in terms of promoting peace in the region. And Georgia, until now, plays a very important role for our neighbors, Armenia and Azerbaijan, which are the landlocked countries. And Georgia's economic partnership with these countries plays a crucial role for their economic development. So that's why we are just happy that the peace deal has been signed between the two countries, and we are hopeful that it will further advance the peace in the South Caucasus region. It's just crucial for the strengthening of the political positions of all our countries. It's crucial also for improving the economies in our countries. Now all three countries enjoy the high economic growth rates. And it's also because of the peace, because of the excellent cooperation between our three countries. We have to continue in the same manner. And that's the Georgian vision about developments in the South Caucasus region.
Finally, of all the former Soviet republics, Prime Minister, Georgia has always been the one that has been regarded as most pro-Western. Is it still the case today, or is Georgia increasingly looking east?
Yeah, so we are, of course, essentially pro-Western as a government, but also as a people. So if you look at the opinion polls, unfortunately, the recent actions by the European bureaucracy undermined the people's trust to the European Union a little bit, but the support is still very high, and we do our best to keep this mood in the Georgian society, to keep the positive attitude towards the European Union, despite all these unfair actions by the European bureaucracy. So that's why we can firmly say that not only the Georgian government, but also the Georgian people is strongly pro-Western. We are part of the Western culture, we are part of the European culture. So that's why we have a very clear vision in this respect. And again, if the European bureaucracy changes its attitude towards Georgia, I think everything can improve and we can finally become the full-fledged member of the European Union by 2030. It's quite realistic.
Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, thank you very much
for
joining us.
Thank you.
The Georgian Prime Minister is clearly confident that he can ride the political storm and set the country back on the path to negotiating EU membership. There is little doubt that Georgia today stands at a crossroads, not just geographically, but politically. The government's crackdown on dissent could threaten Georgia's European aspirations. But beyond that, it faces a choice between continued integration with the West or a closer alignment with countries in the East. From me, Ghida Fakhry, and the entire team, thanks for watching.